It's good? Cool. So, great. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming to this session. We're going to talk about an hour about our ANTS framework. And I know, kudos to you, because it's always hard when the other session is held by Greg Nagel. So thanks for coming. Yeah, we are very happy. We means this gentleman over here is Jan Welker.
Hi, guys.
He has a couple of roles, of course, security engineer. He's also core member of our ANTS developer team. My name is Michael Husar. And unfortunately, Balzer Schwanden, also a member of our core developer team, wasn't able to come to this great conference. So, yeah, we are all with the University of Basel in Switzerland. There are a couple of service providers there. We are with the client services organizational unit. But more about the university later. Let's have a look at our agenda. First of all, I'm going to give a short overview of our university to set the scene where we have to provide our services in and why we came up with that kind of solution for configuration management. The part about configuration management also covers the obstacles in our way, of course, and then the ANTS framework. We call it a framework because it consists of a couple of components. At the end, we take a little step back, provide you with a little roundup, and at the end, hopefully, we can answer your questions. So, short overview of our organization. The University of Basel is about 550 years old. It's a research university. We are looking at about 5,600 employees. It's an equivalent of 3,000 full-time, 4,300 scientists. We have about 400 professors and 1,300 people in administration, and that covers, of course, us too. Students, there are 13,000 students, and we have 7 faculties and 29 departments. Our university is not situated in one big campus, unfortunately. We have about 90 sites spread all over the city of Basel. And for us as a service provider, this is a very important fact coming into effect. Of course, this is reflected by our organizational structure. So we are here with the client services and support, and we provide the frameworks and backends for 3 operating systems. It's Windows, Linux, and Mac. Today, of course, we concentrate on Mac. And we do also third-party support. Then you see 5, we call them IT service centers. These are local sites, and these sites are also spread all over Basel to be close to our end customers. And these site administrators, they use our tools and backends to provide the managed clients to the end user, to the scientists. And we can only reach the end user through them. And therefore, this so important end user experience for us is twofold. Of course, we have to keep in mind the end user, but also our site administrators there. Yeah, what do we do? Nothing special here. We do what all administrators do. We try to enroll our machines. We, if the machine really hardly crashes, have to deploy the operating system again. We do software delivery, patching, license monitoring, authentication, authorization, remote control, inventory, and of course configuration. We're going to talk today a lot. For all these tasks above, we had tools in place we were rather happy with. Of course, we are using Monkey. Thanks, Greg, again, for that wonderful tool. And we had Charm for VPP, DEP. It's also working like a charm. But what we had for configuration management, we weren't happy with. So now it's 2 years ago, we started a project to find the missing piece. It should fit into our environment. We are using Git for version control. So let's have a look at that.
All right, let's get into the meat. So like with every good project, we started with requirements gathering. Michael explained our very federated or decentralized infrastructure organization to you. So I will get to you what this brings, what kind of requirements this brings to us as a framework provider. So as he mentioned earlier, we will provide the framework. But the site administrators, they provide the service to the end user. So there's kind of a disconnect. So we have to have very tight integration to them to actually get to know what's necessary. those service or those local site administrators, they are not just focused on Mac OS. So they have all kinds of specialities. They support Windows, they support Linux, they support all software, and it's difficult. So they're not necessarily Mac OS specialists. And therefore, the interface for the Mac OS environment should be very easy to use for them, because it's just one of the tools they are supposed to use. So he provided you the information that it's basically very federated, and we need tight delegation. So, you know, one local administrative site shouldn't really mess with the others. So we need to have delegation there. And the host management is done by the site administrators. So we don't even know about the clients. So we don't know which machine belongs to which department. We don't know who uses which machine. We don't know which configuration should be on that machine. So we are blind. So also the changes that we push needs to be tested by some local people, because, you know, we can have the fanciest configurations. If they're not tested in the actual environment they're running on, it's useless. It's a high risk. And like in every big environment, our hosts roam the networks. So, you know, we don't know the addresses of them, so we can't connect to our machines, which will come in later, how we solve this. And like in every research institute, you know, on day 0 of a new MacBook release, like yesterday, for example, researchers will be at these local sites presenting their nice new laptop, and, you know, they would be really dissatisfied if they can't use it right away. You know, if we tell them, okay, we will be ready in 2 months, you know. All right, so then we have our own requirements from our team, because we had configuration managements before, and there's a reason we kicked off a project for new configuration management. Obviously, we weren't satisfied with the old one. So we want to have strong versioning embedded in the whole workflow of the configuration management. We don't just want versioning, that you push something into the versioning system, but you deploy it somehow some other way. So we want it to be a part of the configuration workflow. We want to curate the configurations, because as Michael showed you before, we have different sites and they have different skill levels. So some of them are more focused on Windows, and their Mac skill level isn't as good as to the ones from others. So in the past, we had varying quality of configurations. So we wanted to provide a framework where the local site administrators can take full advantage of the knowledge within the university. So they're not just by their own. So we want to spread the good quality stuff. And, you know, we are a team of 3 people for Mac and Linux, so, you know, we are on our own. No, we're not on our own. We have other infrastructure in the university, and we try to occupy that other infrastructure instead of building new stuff that we have to maintain ourselves. All right, in the past, we never had a development, testing, or production workflow. We just copied stuff around, and as you know, with copying stuff around, you lose information. You might have small mistakes that end up badly, so we want a real environment where we have development, testing, and production. This is basically like everyone does it in software development already, or in big infrastructure stuff. And we didn't want a vendor login. So in the past, we had a system that was proprietary, and now that we moved away from it, all the information was lost, right? It's binary blobs, and, you know, you can't get the stuff out of it anymore. So we don't want to make this mistake again. So on day X, when our configuration management doesn't suit the purpose anymore, we want to be able to replace it without hassle. So if we can read the configurations, or if there's even a migration path to a new tool, that would be nice. And you guys have seen a lot of presentations here, and I think they all have one thing in common. That's the KISS principle. So keep the stuff simple. Don't build huge complex systems. Build a system with one task and with one solution, and focus on that. So don't make it unnecessarily complex. This is the Wikipedia abstract of it, so it basically says what I just said. The next print, that also brings you to a modular design. So if you have a lot of tools that do one thing only, and one thing in the best possible way, that leads automatically to a modular design. So it brings you away from big monoliths like in traditional IT. And I'm firing out buzzwords here. Infrastructure as code is very established in big organizations for servers and stuff, or for networking infrastructure. But on the clients, it's just starting. So some people are doing Share for Puppet. It's exactly what we want to do. you know, it's a fancy word. It just tells you don't click around to change configurations, but you know, write small scripts or templates or just have your configuration in a decorative way. So that's that. So I told you earlier that we would like to occupy existing infrastructure, and for that we have to know what's already available to us. You know, we are a big organization, very federated, so we actually have to evaluate what's available to us. And I mentioned earlier that the support staff is not necessarily Mac OS X focused, so if we are able to provide them with an interface that they're already familiar with to manage their Macs, they will be really happy. So let's take this into account. And if we have a modular graphical user interface that basically is not part of the tool, that would enable us in the future, if we have to change the underlying tool, we can take the same GUI and the support staff will be able to use the same tool. So it's not like they have to be trained on the new interface. You know, if we can make this in a modular fashion, they can just use their GUI that they're used to, but we switch the underlying configuration management, for example. And the permission delegation. So it's very difficult to make very good and very granular permission delegations. So we thought we are not the first ones doing this, right? There are other systems that occupy extensive delegation permissions, for example, on network shares. You have different hierarchies, different nested groups and all that stuff. So we found something, and prepare your rotten tomatoes, because we are at the Mac conference and we are going to introduce Microsoft Active Directory to you. Please. Okay. No, actually, you know, it's not pretty, but it does all those things. It has a user interface. It's familiar to the support staff because they already use it for their permission delegation and everything. So, yeah. Then, at one point, you have to store the configuration. And as we said in the KISS principle, you know, it should be modular, and it should also be able to, we should be able to version this stuff. So what comes into mind? Any guesses? Versioning system. So we will store all our configurations in the central Git infrastructure that's luckily already provided to us by our infrastructure providers. So that was an easy guess. Then configuration software. So when we started the project, we looked into Salt, we looked into Puppet, we looked into Chef, we looked into Ansible, and the first thing we dropped was Ansible. Now we already spoiled the outcome because of our title, but let me explain to you why we didn't choose Ansible in the first place, because only the push mode was known to us. I will get into that later, but in an environment with roaming clients, the push mode isn't really feasible. So that brings us to, we need some kind of an agent on the client, like in Chef or Puppet. And you know, when we read the documentation of Ansible, you know, we were so sad that it couldn't do like a agent mode, but it can if you read the documentation. There's the Ansible pull mode. I'll get into that later. And if you notice something here, we don't have anything missing. So we have no infrastructure that we need to build ourselves. We just, you know, implant the system into existing components and are happy with it. That brings us to the ANTS framework. So since the framework is basically just some glue around Ansible, I'll get into Ansible terminology, because we've seen during this conference that Ansible is not so common in the Mac world. There are some people using Puppet and Chef, but so I'll get into the Ansible terminology so that you get something out of this talk, even if you don't like Ants, but if you like Ansible. So I'll start with that. I'll get into inventory mapping and the configurations themselves, then how we do the reporting of the configurations, then the interaction of our different components. Then we will show you a run, and then once you're all super happy what this can do, we will show you how to install it. And then integration into other tools, because in a modular design, integration into other tools is key. So if we could integrate this into a Monkey or something, it would be really handy. All right. I will get into the Ansible terminology. This is not a definitive guide. This is a simple guide just to get you guys an overview. So there's stuff missing. So when I talk about inventory in Ansible, I'll talk about groups of hosts, or just hosts. So it can be anything. Playbooks, they are the mapping of configurations to hosts or groups of hosts. And you have roles. This is In Ansible, rows are comprised of tasks, and they contain the payload. They can contain variables, they can contain templates, or all these nice Ansible module stuff. You have the variables. This is just variables. Like in any programming language, you can assign them to roles, or you can assign them to templates. Makes your life easier when you have the same stuff you want to do, but with different parameters, for example. And you have a strong JNinja 2-based templating system. For the ones of you who already do web development or stuff, Django occupies the same system, and it's common and it's proven to work. All right, the Ansible concept. We're still not in Ants, we're in Ansible, so this is not our work, this is directly from Ansible. So the default way to use Ansible is the push mode. So you have a central host. This can be a laptop or it can be professional infrastructure, but it needs the Ansible software installed. It will then need the inventory, because everything runs on this one instance, and it will need the configurations. These configurations are sent out via SSH to all the clients. So if you can reach them, it can configure them. The pros of this setup is you don't need software on the clients. It's extremely streamlined. So, you don't need to install any agents or any fancy software, no configurations on the clients. It's just the one server that connects to the clients over SSH. Only SSH is required. But every upside has a downside, so you need to know how to reach your clients. If you don't know the IP of a host, for example, if it's in the Wi-Fi, you can't apply your configurations. And if we have researchers, they go to foreign countries where you don't have internet, maybe we want to enforce some configurations there too, even if they're offline. This is something, it's a shortcoming of the Ansible push mode. But there's the upside down way of Ansible. We introduced it in the title. It's called the pull mode. So it's just it's the opposite. It's the other way around. So you have your clients, and Ansible runs on the clients themselves. So you need to install Ansible on every single client. It's not so smooth as the other solution, but I will show you what you gain from that. You need the inventory on every single client, and you need the configuration on every single client. So you're duplicating your stuff in a massive way. Pros of this: you don't need a central instance. So in theory, you can scale infinite. In theory, you need to scale your other infrastructure, but you don't need to scale your configuration management. And you don't need to know how to reach the clients, because this is self-running, so all the logic is on the client. It can configure itself even if the name is wrong or something. And you can run it offline. So if somebody is, for example, in a remote country and he decides, hey, it's a great idea to let somebody log into my machine using root, 15 minutes later with our system, it's set back to sane default. Okay, every upside has a downside again. Ansible needs to be installed on the clients, so you need to have some kind of system, like Monkey, for example, to deploy Ansible to all the clients. And you need a way to manage your decentralized inventory. And no Ansible vault on pull mode, so you cannot store secrets in Ansible pull. All right, let's get into the inventory stuff. So inventory in Ansible is very easy. It can be a text file. The text file can have groups. I know these groups look like configuration names, and that is because they are named after configuration names. So for example, the browser settings group is just a group that will trigger the browser configuration, for example. And then those groups can have hosts, and one host can be in n groups or anything. All right. That doesn't scale very well when you come to delegation, or if you have to maintain this inventory on a lot of clients. It's just, it's not feasible. Luckily, Ansible has a solution for that. It provides you a way to occupy or to write a dynamic inventory source. So instead of having this one static file, you can just give Ansible a script or a binary, and it will run that. And as long as that returns a JSON file in a group host format, Ansible will be happy. So we will take great advantage of this functionality. So we wrote our own inventory source. We took Python to do that because Python is already available on the Mac. Ansible is written in Python, and some other components that we've written are also in Python, so we have some knowledge in Python. And as I told you before, we are trying to occupy Active Directory, so I'm querying that with my inventory source. I know you guys, you Apple guys, you don't like binding your operating system to Active Directory, so this works without binding to Active Directory, because we can have simple authentication in the script if you want. So it's really simple. We just search for the fully qualified domain name of the host in Active Directory, and we return its groups in JSON format. JSON format, you all are familiar with it, looks like this. This is the same representation of the inventory file I shown you earlier, just in JSON. And you know, I told you earlier that we would like to run some configurations offline. So in this inventory script, I'm also dealing with that. So if I can't query Active Directory, I will just use the previously created cache and query that. And if we are offline, so if we're running in caching mode, or the other way around, if we're online, I will add a group to the list of groups telling Ansible that we're online. That way we can run some configurations that require Active Directory, like for example some mapping of Kerberos-enabled network drives. We're only doing that if we are online. That way we keep the noise down for the reporting. And that is provided as a component of the ANTS framework. So if you want to look into this, feel free to. All right. I showed you the theory of this whole inventory script, but how does it feel for the user? And in that way, the user is not the end user, but it's the local site administrators, so their user experience. So they can use Active Directory users, groups, and computers, which is familiar to them. It's already available, and support staff knows how to deal with it, so they should be happy, right? And if you've ever used it before, delegation in it is a key component, so it's very easy to delegate stuff in Active Directory. And one nice feature is in Active Directory, you can have nested groups. So you can have your whole organization organized in these groups. You can have, for example, the chemistry department and 12 configurations. You can have the biology department, 13 configurations. So this is really easy to achieve. And I will now show you one of the most beautiful interfaces. It's unfortunately not enabled in dark mode, but it's what's available. So it's the Active Directory user and computer management. It's not pretty, but it fits the purpose. And you know, if people are happy using it, you know, we are happy providing it. So the next step here is the Ansible Playbook and roles. This is where you assign the configurations to the computers, for example. So you have a line here. This is the most basic playbook type. It can be much more complex in real-world examples. I just use the most, the easiest to show you how it looks. So you can assign tasks. A task should always have a name, because if somebody that didn't write the configuration might not fully understand all the technical stuff, but they are of course able to read this and they know what the configuration will do. So in this way, or in this example, we will configure Safari, for example. Then in Ansible, you have the nice concepts of modules. This is an example module. It writes OS/6 defaults. There are plenty of others. There are templates, there are file parsers, there are user modules, all that nifty stuff, so you don't have to deal with file parsing anymore in most ways. And this is then just the payload. So you set the defaults domain, you want to write that one key, it's a Boolean, you want to write it to true, and you want to make sure this Boolean is present. So the state is present, so it will always be present in this configuration management. So how do we develop these kind of tasks or these kind of playbooks? So everything that we write is tracked in Git. So the playbooks, the roles and the variables and the templates are all in Git. The only thing that isn't in Git, the versioning system, is the host to group mapping. That's an Active Directory. So we use 3 different Git branches. You might guess what they are. So the first one is development. This is where we develop our stuff. Everybody can commit, everybody can break stuff, it's fine. Second one is testing. This is where the first time in the workflow where we push stuff to computers that aren't at our desk. So it's pushing stuff to local administrators, for example. And there we already, the quality control kicks in. So we only allow pull requests in these branches. And therefore we can at least do some sanity check that it's not something that somebody wrote on Friday afternoon, you know, where you have the beer in mind and screw things up. So, you know, there's a sanity check of a second person. And, you know, production, of course, is the same, even more important. And one thing this allows us is, if, for example, our local administrators are always in the test group, that means they can do the testing for us. So we can utilize them to actually do the testing for us in their specialized environment. So they are happy that they get the new stuff early, and we are happy that they test the new stuff quickly. All right. How do we ship this stuff? So you already noticed that we have a strong focus on Active Directory groups. So we just have testing, development, production groups in Active Directory. We assign them to the machines and use the same mechanism to assign the Git branches to the different hosts. Of course, yeah, this is again the same procedure. So we have the production hosts in the productive branch, the testing hosts in the testing branch, and the development hosts in the development branch. Now, every configuration management is missing something. If you can't tell if a configuration was applied, or if it failed, or maybe it didn't do anything, it's also important information. So for debugging purposes, we log everything to local files, and this is basically just how Ansible does it anyways. We just split up the logs, because if you have a big environment with a lot of configurations, in Ansible sometimes it's tricky if you just want to see the ones that failed, or if you want to see the ones that ran okay. So we just split the log, it's easier for debugging. And we write the Ansible status into a dedicated file too. So, you know, a not so tech-savvy support person, for example, can easily read what happened in a run. So it will tell them in an Ansible fashion, 5 okay, 2 failed, and 1 didn't run, for example. And since it's so difficult to go to every 1,000 computers and read these status information out, we also push that into our SOL. And just this morning at 6 o'clock local time, Bals, our third colleague, pushed it into our Git repository on GitHub, so you can look how we do it and take advantage of it. In the future, we want to occupy our ELK infrastructure. Our infrastructure team was nice enough to actually provide a full ELK stack to us that scales infinitely, they tell us. So we are trying. And then we can do even more detailed central logging of all clients. We can provide nice dashboards to our support staff so they can track, you know, in like a traffic light situation, they see that 5 clients are red, we should look into that. And we can give them historic data. So if we are rolling out configurations and, you know, at 70%, our management asks us, when is this done? We can tell them 70% is done. We expect it to be done tomorrow. All right, I've shown you now all these different components of Ansible. And now you're probably interested how they interact with each other. It's pretty simple. So you start with a host that you would like to configure. It's represented by this gray box. It's not space gray. And you have the configurations that you want to apply to this host. So you need the ANTS framework. It comes with Ansible pre-installed and everything. And you need 2 external infrastructure components. You need the Git repository, and you need Active Directory, or any other LDAP server. It just does LDAP. First thing that happens is the ANTS framework triggers the dynamic inventory script, and that reads which groups a client has. Then it triggers Ansible pull, and Ansible pull, this is an out-of-box functionality. It's not something we wrote. It's just all taken care of by Ansible. It does a git clone, gets all the configurations, and then applies them on the machine. Bob's your uncle. So this is as simple as it is. And actually, if you look at the thing, it's much easier if you just run it manually, for example. And Michael will now show you how to run it.
Thanks. So now that you've seen how this works all in theory, let's have a look at an actual machine. I'm not very good friends with the demo guard, so I tried to record a video, see whether that's better. This is a classic machine we set up, nothing on it but the ANTS framework installed. And let's have a look at a manual run. As I've told you before, we have also a launch daemon that runs every 15 minutes. You can configure that if you want shorter or longer. But right now, we are doing just a manual run. And for that, we open up a terminal window, do a sudo ANTS, and authorize. So, and that's the end of the first ANTS run. At the end, you can see that so-called play recap. The machine's name, it's a show, a machine of our domain, and it had 2 tasks. So see one green task and one yellow task changed. And the yellow task changed that it's setting message of the day. So the first thing that the first ANTS run does, it sets the message of the day in terminal. So these 2 runs, as you see in the recap, are okay. One changed. No machine has been unreachable, and no machine failed. So that sounds nice to me. We'll open up a new terminal window in this example to see whether the message is here. And hooray! That's the message of the day. Of course, you can customize that. And the next thing we want to look at, we are looking at groups. So ANTS with option G for groups is showing us what's the machine part of. It's just part of, it's member of the ANTS common group. So this group you would use to push out a configuration to all your machines. And that's what we did. We push out in that example the message of the day to all our machines. So yeah, that was really hard. So how do you get there? As Jan said, we have to have a really stony way to get that thing on the machine. So there's one way. You can use pip install ANTS. That's rather easy. And we provide you with a full package installer. So this package takes care of all the dependencies. You get the path variable set that you can use the ANTS command. You get Xcode command line tools that you have the git command. And of course, you get the launch daemon, as I told you. Where do you get it? You get it just from GitHub. There it is. You can download the package, and it's done in about 2 minutes. So Jan promised that I'll show you a more tempting example, and I will do that in 2. So we want to manipulate the local only manifest of Monkey in the first one. And then we do the same thing, but the second time we do an example where we utilize the Active Directory groups to do that. So once again, short recap. I guess everybody knows it, but Monkey consists of 2 manifests. It uses the server-side manifest. Out of the box, it's activated. We use it to push the software we want to have on all our machines with the server-side manifest. There's another manifest. It's called the local-only manifest, and it needs to be configured. Monkey has to be told that he should use that local file on the machine itself to install individual software. So we use that to get the stuff for the chemistry, for the physics, just the specific software on the different machine types. And Monkey runs, it makes a little merge of these 2 manifests and does what he has to do. So the software is always installed by Monkey. We are not installing software. We just configure the local only manifest to tell Monkey what to do. So this is the task. We want to write that local only manifest plist. And of course, there are 2003 ways to do that. We chose, hey, why can't we write it with ANTS? So that's what we're going to do. And on our side, you see we use this local manifest now in this example to trigger the installation of CyberDuck via Monkey. And then, of course, we want to get rid of that duck again. So we use also ANTS to get rid of the CyberDuck. What do you need? On our GitHub, you see 2 example playbooks. So there's one playbook. It's called Monkey YAML. It should be more or less Monkey install. But this one holds, of course, the name of the software title, CyberDuck. And you see it's like managed install CyberDuck variable. And we have another variable, and this is called local only manifest name. So we want it to be flexible at that way. So if you want to have your local only manifest named in a different way, you can just pass that on in that variable. And the actual work that's done, that's covered by the role, and the role is Monkey local only manifest. So this is for install, and for removal, we have the Monkey removal YAML playbook. More or less the same thing, but now the variable we are setting is uninstall, managed uninstall CyberDuck with the name of that application CyberDuck. And the name is the same. We want to write to local only manifest plist, and we are using the same role, so we don't have to change the role that's doing the actual work. So here it goes. We have this wonderful machine here. Let's see whether we can look what it does when it started. First thing, we want to see the groups of the machine. As Jan told you, this machine is also in the group AD connected, so in case you want to push something that needs a connection, this machine is connected on the network, it's in a test group, and it has a command. We are starting the playbook, so the playbook that installs is the monkey YAML playbook. The ANTS run starts, you see the recap, it changed 2 things. It wrote that local only manifest and it was okay. You do a cat on this local manifest, and here you see managed installs, CyberDuck is added to the managed installs. So that worked. Let's verify that with the GUI. Let's fire up the monkey GUI. You see CyberDuck is one pending install. So that did good. Next thing, we want to check what we have in our repo, I guess. I'm very good with 10 fingers writing, as you see. So this is the place where we have our repo. You see we got the main YAML, we got the monkey YAML, we got the monkey removal, the profiles, roles. So I've had a look in that playbook, in that one I showed you before as a screenshot. So what we got is exact the same thing. We had under installs CyberDuck. Let's have a look at the removal playbook. And here we have under uninstalls also CyberDuck. So the next thing we're going to do, we call the playbook with the removal task. So we key in that playbook correctly without any typos. And remove, yep, good job. So that run also successfully completed. So have a look at the plist file we manipulated, and hooray, nothing under installs, but uninstalls holds the CyberDuck. We'll check again, and hooray, CyberDuck is gone. Okay, so of course you say, yeah, playbook, this is not really very advanced. We have all these variables in the playbook. I wrote there CyberDuck, I assigned the variable directly in the playbook, so that doesn't scale. So the next thing we want to do, of course, we want to use the not dark mode GUI from ADOC to use that to delegate the task of assigning software for install and uninstall to our local site administrators. And in this example, we want to use this messenger, this ADM, and we want to trigger that again via monkey, but this time with the help of the distribution groups. Task is the same. We want to write that plist, but we are having the distribution groups with the variables, and through the definition of these variables, we want to write the local plist file accordingly. So what do you need? Okay, first thing is a little bit tedious. You need a list of all your software titles, and you need this 3 times, but of course you can copy it. So you need a list for what you want to manage. So we have a list for the manage installs. We have a list for the optional installs. Thanks in that place again to Greg for accepting our pull request for optional installs. Optional installs, you remember, it's more or less the kiosk mode. If you want to give the user the option, yeah, I want it not, he finds it under optional installs. And of course, uninstalls. So, and then you need the proper groups, of course, for identifying these variables. You want to define these group variables. And the funny part is, if they are not defined, they are ignored. So one less thing to do. And how does it look like? Now you see what we have in our repo under the role macOS local only manifest, and we are looking at the main task. And the main YAML looks like this. You see it's not really much. You have the first part, we include these lists with all our software titles. And then we make sure that the directory exists, so we don't want to write a plist file to something that's not there. And then there's this copy command. We copy the manifest to the machine, and we do that with a template. Here you see the local only manifest Ginger2 template, and then the destination, and the according mode. And at the end, last but not least, very importantly, we trigger a manual monkey check because we want monkey to see that something changed, so that he knows, okay, there's something to be done, maybe. As Jan mentioned, comes very handy, the Ginger 2 template. It looks like this. So more or less like a normal template for this plist file. But the nice thing here, you can use loops. And we are looping through our list of software we have. We have this endless list of software titles. We do this for the installs, for the optional installs, and we do that for the uninstalls. And if you look at that list is very long. You have ADM, you have TeamViewer, and so on. But Balz came on with a clever solution. At the last line you see, with that line, we get rid of all the stuff that didn't get set, and we don't end up with the endless list, but in the end with just the one that has got a variable set. That looks like that. Don't forget to set the variables in the playbook. We are here at the group variables. And these group variables, of course, have to have the same name as they have in your Active Directory. And here, of course, the ADM group variable is set to ADM. So it's also easy. And once again, our friend. These are the groups. They have the same name in Active Directory, user and computers. And if we run that thing, we end up, hooray, with the plist file that got generated. And we only have under managed installs ADM. And that's when the monkey run takes place. We end up with ADM on the machine. Now a little roundup.
All right. So what did we present you, and does it meet our requirements that we shown earlier? So let's review the requirements that I mentioned before. So are we able to delegate to the site admins with this concept? I think we are. So we can occupy the Active Directory and the pull requests, and we can delegate everything we do to operational teams if we want to. So I give that a check. Do we have a three-stage development workflow? We do. It's just done with Git branches and some fancy assignment to hosts. Check. Do we support roaming hosts? So there's no component that has to track clients. So we can basically run this everywhere. We can run it on the cloud. We did some testing, works fine. We can run it on machines that are not even connected to our campus network. Check, works fine. We are enforcing versioning. We're not just using versioning, but we are incorporated versioning in the whole workflow in a way that there's no way around it, so you can't forget it. Check. And 0-day support for Mac OS 6 release. I see some critical views here. We can't promise anything, but we have survived 3 major releases so far, and we think that we don't have a problem because Ansible is so encapsulated. It doesn't have very many dependencies into the operating system, and the configurations are plist files, which is the supported way of Apple. So we are looking forward to the next release. And we want to be able to curate the configurations to make sure that a certain level of quality is guaranteed. We can do this again with the pull requests of Git. And we didn't want to establish any new infrastructure that we have to maintain. And luckily, our infrastructure guys are providing Git and Active Directory, so free lunch for us. We didn't want a vendor login. And since everything in Ansible is written in text files, if we need to establish a migration path to a new tool, the worst thing that we have to do is to actually read the Ansible configurations, read the salt configurations, for example, and just move them. Or there might be a migration script or something. So check. Now, did we follow the KISS principle? We are doing configuration management and configuration management only. We don't do software deployment. We don't do MDM or anything. There are better tools for that, and we don't do that. So yeah, we're following the KISS principle. Infrastructure is code. Everything is written in a descriptive way or in templates. So I think we can check that one too. Now, the dark side of our presentation, the limitations of this concept.
And of course, that's my part again, being dark. So yeah, File Vault, as you've heard, is not available in Ansible Vault is not available, and therefore no secrets in your configurations. You have to store them somewhere else, maybe Active Directory. User credentials for macOS, as we read the manual, have to be clear text, so no, don't do that. And if you want to push a lot of big binaries into your Git, it will bloat, so don't do that either. But you know, these limitations, you can easily overcome that with other tools, and that's more or less our approach. We have the modular approach, and if you have to cope with that, use another tool. To the lessons learned,
yes.
back to Jan.
What have we learned during this project? We came from a configuration management that wasn't very modern. So it wasn't in a modular way, it wasn't infrastructure as code. So we are actually the right people to judge this new configuration management, because we had to deal with all the shortcomings of the other one. So one thing is, we don't have to maintain it ourselves. We have to maintain the configurations, but we don't have to maintain the infrastructure of it, because we are using what's available to us, and it's provided by other teams, and they're spending a huge amount of time to, for example, in Active Directory, they are running a huge cluster that provides authentication services to the whole university. So if that is down, our configuration management isn't the problem at that point. So use what's available to you, don't reinvent the wheel. Use a modular setup, because only then you can occupy the well-established tools that others are already providing to you. So if you have a big monolith and it requires an inventory, then you have to put all your inventory in that tool. It's not so nice. Don't build or buy monoliths. It's just, once your data is in there, you're locked in that monolith, and it's painful to get out of one. Next one is, in the past, we evaluated if we extend certain tools to fit our needs. But if you do that, you're stuck with maintaining that. So if you, for example, extend a tool and the tool gets an update, you have to make sure that update is compatible to your changes. So we have this this philosophy for us that we use the tools in the way they are designed, and we just use glue to glue them together with other things. So, you know, it might be an API, it might be like a small script that we use, but then the update procedure is simple. You don't need to follow the commits of other people. You just read the documentation of the API, you implement your glue script, and everybody's happy. And by recycling established infrastructure, you get another benefit. It's not just that you are lazy and you don't have to maintain it, but people that already use that are familiar with it, so you don't have to train them. So there are two benefits actually with this. And one thing we take away, and we are definitely not the first ones who tell you that, infrastructure as code works on clients too. So other people use Puppet or Salt or Chef. We just use Ansible because, you know, it's modern and we don't have the other tools in the university, so we are going with Ansible. And if you want to make sure that a certain workflow is followed in your whole procedure, for example, of a configuration management, then enforce it in the workflow. So don't make it optional. Because, you know, everybody knows how it is if you're in the heat of the night and you need to fix something, and the first thing you forget is the documentation. Second thing is you forget to check it into Git. So if Git is a workflow of your whole, is in the workflow of your whole procedure, it's impossible to forget. So even if you're tired or if you're really stressed, it's impossible to forget these things. And make your coworkers feel comfortable, because they will, at a certain level, start to trust you, and they will understand that you will try to make their life as easy as possible. And if there are some shortcomings, they will understand. But as long as they're comfortable with the tools they're using, they will be on your side. And you know, it's not like, you know, we are forcing some guys that are configuring Windows to use some fancy Apple GUIs that are awesome, but you know, if it's just one of your tools, it's a hassle to teach this to people. All right, now that we showed you all the goodies, how can you use it? So it's all open source, it's all on GitHub. Use it. part of our framework is the agent that we showed you. It takes care of the scheduling and of everything. It's the inventory script. We have some example configurations, and we will get better in publishing our internal configurations. We have to paint them a little bit nicer to give them out to you. They're not pretty enough yet. And if you want to participate, please participate on GitHub. It's all in GPL v3. Feel free to use it, extend it, and get your feedback back to us. Now, most of our presentation was basically based on other people's work. So, you know, we have a cool setup now, but it's based on other people's work, and we're extremely happy for that. That one part of that is the infrastructure and the support during our project. So we of course, we thank our own team. We thank the local administrators, because, you know, we can make the nicest system we want. If they can't use it, it's useless. So we are very happy that we had good input from them. Our management for not choosing a big monolith and have us deal with it, but actually building something nice and that helps everybody in the end. And then, you know, the other infrastructure I mentioned is maintained by other teams of our IT services, so we are really happy that we can use them too. Then I don't know if you've heard about this whole meetup scene, but we have an Ansible meetup in a town nearby, and we attended it a couple of times, and we got brilliant feedback from those guys, and I think most of the feedback has been implemented so far. And then the rest of the OSS community. So without Ansible, Python, Monkey, and Sol, we wouldn't be where we were. And last but not least, the organizers of this conference, because we are really enjoying this conference and we are really happy to be part of it. All right, do you have any questions or recommendations? What are we doing wrong? What would you like to know about the framework or our organization?
To throw it.
You have a coffee in there?
Not for long.
So you use the 3 different Git branches?
Yeah.
Right. How do you do the promotion between like dev, testing, and production? Is that a manual process? Have you automated that? I do something similar, so I'm just curious.
So we have, we basically use Atlassian Bitbucket for that. And there you have a nice web interface for the pull requests. And we just create pull requests with it. And then it will show up at somebody's inbox and asking there's a pending pull request. It's very similar to GitHub.
Okay. Yeah. No. Yeah, we do something similar. Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Yeah. You're welcome. Throw it.
Are you actually storing any data in Active Directory, or are you just leveraging the groups that the agent then comes around and checks group membership and then runs actions based on the group membership?
Good question. We are storing exactly nothing in Active Directory, but computer objects and groups that the computer objects are members of. Nothing else.
Okay, so follow-up question then. Whenever changes need to be made to a configuration on a user, for example, you just update that user's group membership, or somebody updates that user's group membership, and then the configuration is changed based off that update. Is that correct?
Yes, we are not doing user-based configurations. We are doing host-based configurations, so we only have computer objects.
Okay.
And you know, this is in real time. So if somebody adds a group to a computer object, the next time Ansible runs or ANTS runs, it will just apply that too, if he's online.
Okay. Right.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Hey, I had a couple. How are you creating your computer objects in Active Directory?
Manually, it's part of the staging process. They need to have an IP address, fully qualified domain name, and then we just have them create the computer object in ADOC.
Okay.
We have scripts that could do that too, but it's just for the support stuff. It's easier to do it by hand, because they have a whole workflow how to onboard a system, and that part is not zero touch.
Yeah. So you control the purchasing and how it gets then delivered to people enough that they can do that ahead of time, or well, not you, but
the site administrators are doing that. Yeah.
They're ordering with the EP, and then they get delivered to machines, and then they stage them. We're working on that a little bit to push the work to the actual end user.
We don't have micro MDM yet, but we might be able to glue that together. So,
I guess, and the other question I had was, it's been a while since I've looked through ANTS. When the agent runs, is it running a single playbook, or is it?
Yeah, you include all the other playbooks.
So if there's an error, does it just stop, or do you have a lot of error handling written into all your
so
plays?
it's one big playbook that includes all the other playbooks, and it depends where in the whole hierarchy it breaks. So most of the time, if one breaks, it stops at that point. There might be some lucky stuff, but usually if it breaks, it breaks.
So therefore the check for the Active Directory is at the last thing.
Well, yeah, that's why I ask, is that, I think there's a lot of things that if you're looking at all the configurations you might want to apply to a machine, that there's plenty of them that should be able to be done independently of the others.
True.
And, just trying to find a way. So, I'm doing the same thing. I have a giant playbook, and if it fails, it stops cold. So you either have to do a lot of error handling or find another way to do it. So I'm interested to see.
Actually, we are quite lucky so far. We have, of course, we have some breaking playbooks, but that is usually an error that we need to know about. So actually, I'm not changing a problem to a feature, but in that case, we are notified about it. Of course, it would be nicer if other playbooks would continue to work, but we have some playbooks that depend on other playbooks, so it's really difficult to decide if that is essential or not. So for example, as Michael showed you earlier, we use the notify a lot. So to do the dependency stuff in the configurations, that works great. But, yeah.
This is not a failing playbook, but of course there's no module for profiles. So we are checking for the ID. And of course, if the ID is not there, we know that this configuration profile has to be installed. But we are working a little bit with that.
Yeah, we're basically using the error handling to check if certain things are there or not.
Yeah. And do you do any kind of, maybe not released yet, but like aggregation of this is what I can get out of defaults, this is what's coming out of profiles? Because those are kind of separated as it stands.
No, we are not. But the profiles we are writing. So if there was something in there before, it's gone. So that way we don't need to report because we are overwriting it. But it's also a nice way, actually, if we overwrite stuff persistently, that means, for example, if we haven't had a change in our management for a couple of days, but one machine is changing constantly, we know somebody is trying something. And that's nice too. But no, we are not reporting back any things we overwrite.
Yeah, we have local administrators a lot in the university. So that happened a lot, that every 15 minutes our settings get applied and then you get a phone call. The client is not working. It's working, but what are you trying to do?
It helps us a little bit to keep the thing in a known state, because I don't know how many of you work in a university, but we have very creative minds. And they use their computer in the same way they do their research, and we have certain settings that are relevant for the function of the computer, so we set those. We are not changing desktop backgrounds and stuff like this, so we're trying not to force anyone.
Are you doing a lot of your profile management with an MDM right now, or are you doing it all with ANTS?
We're doing as little as is needed with DEP, like the kernel extension whitelisting, so that does kick in right away, because we're not at micro MDM yet. But we try to do normal profiles, and then we do this with the profiles command, and with keeping track in ANTS of these profiles. But we try to do it as little as possible via MDM commands.
Because in Jam, for example, if you set a setting, it might set a lot of other settings too, which is not really what you want.
Yes, I'm quite familiar with that.
It's probably a feature. It knows what you want to do better than you. But also, Michael showed you the whole system with the variables and the loops. And this is something we haven't seen in other systems yet.
We got more or less like an angry sales rep from that big company, because sometimes the inventory functionality of the profiles didn't work, and we said, but this field is supposed to have that and not that, and why don't you use the Jamf configuration management?
Yeah,
that was
Any more questions?
At the beginning, you said something about software licensing. Do you handle that? I don't know. I'm like, my memory is failing me. But would you handle that in AD? Is it?
No.
So there was no software, like, so, okay.
Yeah, we're leveraging the Jamf licensed software section to keep track of Adobe Photoshop and so on.
Okay.
If you refer to the big list, what we are doing, yeah,
Okay.
this is the part we use Jamf for.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank
to
you.
scan the machines, what they have installed.
What they have is, okay.
Any more questions?
So with your clients pulling their configurations from Git, say every half hour, however often it is, have you had any scaling issues with Git?
No. So we are using Bitbucket, and we thought about this, and we thought how we would deal with it when we scale, when we grow much bigger than one instance can handle. But with Git, this is simple. You can just fork out lots of repositories, load balance them. We also have some fancy load balancers at the university. So if we use HTTPS for our repositories, we can load balance it there. But so far we haven't had any problems, and we have about 1,000 and something machines in there.
1,200 something.
Yeah. And of course we have some, Michael mentioned the launch daemon, and we are not launching it every 15 minutes. We are launching it every 15 minutes, but then we have a random delay of 15 minutes, so we are distributing the load.
I'm assuming your Bitbucket is self-hosted?
It is.
Okay, so I tried the same thing. I hope your server folks with Bitbucket are better than mine, because when we hit about 3,000, 4,000 machines doing Git pulls, they got angry at us.
Okay.
So just a heads up.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Appreciate that.
I hope your server folks are better than mine.
We'll
A
prepare
lucky
them.
coincidence, I'm one of the two guys hosting this, so it will bite myself. So yeah.
You're the first to know.
Yeah, I will be the one.
Any more?
Any questions? Okay. If you still have any questions and you're not asking them now, please send us emails. We are old school. We don't have the Slack. He has Slack, but I don't. So just drop us an email or talk to us later. Thank you very much, guys.
Thanks a lot.